Hey, welcome to POA Talks, where we want to help you grow 30 minutes at a time. Today we have a special guest, Landon Gore. So honored to have you. As you know, on every first Thursday of the month, we release a brand new podcast, and so we wanted to share this with you. So my co-host is Pastor Andrew, and super excited about the conversation we're going to have today.
I'm pumped to be here today. Let's go.
We are excited.
Yeah.
So Landon, obviously you're an evangelist. You evangelize full-time, is that correct?
Yes.
So how did you get to be a full-time evangelist?
Man, it's kind of a crazy story. When I was going to college, I was really convinced that I was going to start a church, and kind of just had that as my focus and as my goal after school. And while I was at school, the Lord started dealing with me about traveling and about evangelizing. And I'm not going to lie, I kind of freaked out. That just wasn't, I just didn't really have a reference for it. And so finally, I remember in this service, I gave God one of those ugly cries, one of those snotty, yes, I will, and so I did. And so slowly the doors started opening, and I started traveling locally, and then I started traveling more further out. And after college, I ended up going overseas for some time. Spent some time in Spain with the Herods, changed my life, and just added on to my ministry, and in so many layers, in so many ways, and have been traveling ever since. So October will be 8 years.
8 years.
It's been a wild journey.
Wow. Yeah, that's intense. So you mentioned it was in a service that you had this altering life plan for you. You wanted to start a church, which that's pretty bold in and of itself. But
Yeah.
then God dealt with you. Tell us about that experience. Was that just this aha moment, or was that something you had to kind of seek through and seek counsel on, or what was the definitive moment where you realized I have to do this, or my life's not going to be how it should be?
Yeah, I was already kind of getting nudges in that direction, impressions in that direction, and just kept feeling in my spirit that the Lord was kind of changing my trajectory. And then it was in that service that night. It was I was actually at a Unleashed student conference.
Okay.
It was hosted by Garen every year, and I would go, and each year would be such a blessing. Well, that year, somebody had come and they had spoken in my ear that I was going to preach to people that I didn't know, go to places I'd never been, and I said a few other things, and that was just really the solidifying moment. One of the key solidifying moments for me. I just knew God was dealing with me about traveling, evangelizing, and I didn't say yes to the details and the nuances. I just said yes. I didn't even fully know what I was saying yes to, but it was one of those moments where it's like, God didn't need my understanding. He needed my yes.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't have all the details, the nuances. I didn't have it all figured out. Again, I didn't have really a reference. I felt like I was like born to evangelize, and always knew, oh man, I'm going to evangelize. That's what I want to pursue and do. So it really was kind of out of nowhere. And I'll be honest, I even struggled with the fact of why did I get it wrong? Like I'm a little bit more logical at times. I'm just like, I want to go from A to B, and in my mind I'm thinking I missed it. Like, why did I go? I went probably a good year at college, in my mind, just kind of preparing and getting ready, and then out of nowhere I say yes to something totally different, and that really bothered me for a while. Sure. But I got solace and peace and resolution. And it came from this. One day the Lord just kind of reminded me of, Paul's missionary journeys. He would be heading to a place, and the Lord would tell him no. He would be heading to this city, and the Lord would redirect him. And I just felt like God just kind of put it in my spirit. I can redirect your motion. I can't reroute your inactivity, or the easier version to say would just be you can't steer a parked car. Yeah. So I've come to realize that, as long as you are moving, even if you are moving in the wrong direction, God can redirect you, reroute you. And so that's what I was. I was moving. I may have not been headed in the right direction, but because I was moving, I feel like God was able to redirect me towards evangelism.
Yeah, awesome.
That is cool.
I definitely don't have any problem moving, so I like that.
You're saying, Landon, you were saying yes to God. So whenever in that context, when you're saying yes, are you saying that being an evangelist is a call from God, or is that something more or less that you were pursuing?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. Paul told Timothy, "Do the work of an evangelist," and I obviously see being an evangelist as part of the fivefold ministry, and so I believe there is a specific calling, for pastors and teachers and missionaries and evangelists and so forth. But I also believe that every single one of us as believers have a missional mandate to share the gospel and to preach the gospel, whether it's with a mic behind a pulpit or podium on Sunday, or if it's across a table at Starbucks on Monday. So I feel like that as we say yes to the general will of God, He leads us in His specific will. Right, and so I know that obviously in this season of my life, I'm an evangelist. I'm traveling to different churches and spaces and CMIs and rallies and services and even overseas. But if tomorrow that changes, I know that because of being a believer in the end times, I feel like that it's my mandate to share the gospel, to spread the gospel. So I believe wholeheartedly that is the mission of the church, collectively and individually.
I love that.
Let me ask you a question there, because this is what I love evangelism. Now, by calling, I'm not an evangelist.
Sure.
But everywhere I go, my prayer every morning is, Lord, let me encounter someone today that needs to know you, needs to see you. And it's amazing how He always answers that prayer. Maybe not every morning or every day that I see it that way, but I'm always in touch with someone that, how are you doing? Well, it's not been a good day. Well, can I pray with you or whatever? So I've had some really cool experiences in the mindset of I need to be an example of Jesus, even though it's not my calling. Now, Pastor Garen and I, right now in this season, our calling is a pastor, and I'm super thankful. You mentioned it earlier. Ephesians teaches us He gave some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, some pastors, and some teachers. So the majority, we know the evangelism is one of the five. So the majority of people listening today probably aren't called to a specific evangelism vocalized ministry. So we'll just address Pastor Garen and myself. How do we, I think it's important, and you may disagree, but we have to be evangelists as well, even though it's not getting up in a pulpit or a podium or in front of a class and operating in that ministry. I do feel like God uses us on a daily basis.
Sure.
What do you suggest to people that aren't specifically called for that evangelism ministry? Because I think there's a gifting there that comes with that you have that I don't have. But in the same way, I can also be effective in the environment that I'm in on a daily basis, and I get super excited about talking with Jesus. If you're around me any particular amount of time, you'll know that. In fact, a place that I'm at every day, at the end of September, I'm baptizing a person in Jesus' name that we've had conversations now for the last couple of years.
So amazing.
So it's been a daily, almost daily evangelism type, even though I'm not, preaching at them or operating in that gift. The example of Jesus through me, that I made a decision. I'm going to share Jesus. Yeah. So at the end of September, I'm baptizing them in Jesus' name. So for people like us, cool, yeah. I get super excited about it, even though my calling is an evangelist. What do we do? How do we operate in that? Or do you have some tips for us there?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you alluded to a moment ago. I think all of us are called to steward these everyday moments. Paul said, pray for me that there would be a door of utterance.
Oh, yeah.
And, we've all heard it. Like that. We've been in ministry, and we've heard somebody bemoan the fact that, they don't have more doors opening for them. And, hey, pray for me. I'm still being hidden. I'm still being developed. I want God to open doors for me. And, obviously in our own growth and evolution, we've probably had those moments where we wanted more doors to open for us, but God in His graciousness allows us to mature and opens up our perspective. And so we see this difference in well, how are you defining that door? Well, if you're defining that door as a Sunday or a podium or a mic or a stage, well then, there's a lot of us that could say, oh man, well, this door hadn't opened and I want this door to open. But I think Paul's definition of a door was a little different, because he said, pray that there'd be a door of utterance. Mm-hmm. Pray that I would have an opportunity to say something to a hungry soul, and that it would be received. And so if my definition of a door is somebody who has not heard of the gospel and of Jesus Christ, if my definition of a door is a conversation with a sinner, then I cannot accurately state I don't have any doors opening for me, because this morning there were doors passing me by. Throughout today, tomorrow, if any singular soul that I come into contact with, whether that's the waitress at IHOP or the barista at Starbucks, or the person that I'm passing on downtown, or it's the TSA security person that's in a bad or good mood, as long as I'm encountering souls and there is a potential of conversation about the gospel and Jesus Christ, those are the doors, right? And I think if we look at our life, all of us would be able to say there are doors of evangelism surrounding me.
Everywhere.
So inadvertently, I can't say, oh, I don't have any doors opening up for my ministry. No, it might just be that we've sometimes put the wrong definition of what that door is. And so I'm with you. I think stewarding those everyday moments and praying that prayer, God, whatever you're doing today, don't do it without me. I'm not trying to be a co-star, but I do want to be a co-laborer, and I just want to steward those moments. And you know what I've realized is that it's so easy to get in a rush and to get just busy, and just praying that prayer in the morning, okay, God, lead me, guide me. I know you're doing something. I'm not actually praying for you to do something. I'm praying that I would be aware of what you're doing, and that you wouldn't do it without me. It's already putting yourself in the mental posture of, hey, whatever I'm doing today, whatever my role, it's seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. So if I'm an engineer today, if that's my role, if that's my workplace and space, well, I'm a kingdom seeker who happens to be an engineer.
Right.
You know, if I'm going to work at Starbucks today, well, I'm not just a barista. I'm a kingdom seeker who is a barista. I'm filled with the Spirit. I'm filled with the love of Christ. If you're a parent, if you're a spouse, if you're a business owner, if you're a real estate agent, whoever you are, you are called to pursue the kingdom. And so I think looking for those moments throughout the day requires that mental posture, but it also means that you're going to have to slow down and be aware. Somebody stated, you know, love has a speed, it's cool. Slow. You know, you cannot reach out to people, and you cannot love people, and you cannot communicate the gospel while always being in a hurry, always being in a rush. And so I think just slowing down and being aware of what that definition of a door is, and being aware of how many doors are that we're truly coming into contact with every day. I think that's the game changer.
That's so cool. With that awareness, maybe just to break down for those listening or watching, when we speak about evangelism, if you had to define what that is, what would you say evangelism is in its most basic form?
I think it's sharing the gospel with or without words. You know, the Bible talks about us being epistles, you know, known and read of all men. And I think I know that we can communicate the gospel with our words in conversation, but I also believe that we communicate the gospel with our life. I believe that our actions, our attitude, how we are responding to daily trials and life and junk and just the trauma that this world can bring. I think our life is preaching so much more than what we realize.
Yeah.
And I think there's people that could even watch this and have the tendency or the proclivity to think, well, no one's watching my life, or, I'm not a preacher, I'm not an evangelist, I'm not a pastor. But somebody is watching you.
Yeah.
Somebody, you are the example to somebody of what to do or what not to do.
For sure. Yeah.
And so I think sharing the gospel with words and without words, because I do believe that our life communicates so much more than we realize. They talk about in communication how high the percentage of your body language is.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the same with the body of Christ. I think our everyday actions and just how we carry ourselves and what we respond to and what we don't respond to on Facebook,
no doubt,
and how we engage in political matters, and how we are treating people that are not treating us with the love of Christ, and how we are responding to just, again, dilemma and pain and the trials that life is bringing to all of us. I think when people watch that and see that, we are testifying much more than we realize. But it all comes back to awareness, right? Because all of us are testifying of something.
For sure.
Our life, all of our lives are preaching something, but do we realize that or not? So I think it comes back to awareness.
That's cool. I know for most of us, and then testimonies that I've heard from other people sharing, is that when they're around outside of church, the way the conversation starts is there's something different about you, and that is testifying of the fact that you are living your life in a way that is evangelizing the world around them. So I definitely agree with that statement. In the world of student ministry, and me and you actually were talking about this earlier today.
Which is the best world.
It is the best.
I miss student ministry.
I love it. But in that world, for me personally, what I have seen, and this is a question really for both of you, I have noticed just in conversating between students that their understanding of scriptural teachings and the basis of their belief is so much less. They don't really have some of the same foundations that we were brought up under. So whenever we start speaking about evangelism and evangelizing the world, what do you think is prohibiting or causing maybe a buffer from us hearing the call that we need to evangelize and us being able to actually go out and evangelize? Do you feel like some of that knowledge, that lack of knowledge, is part of our hesitancy to go and spreading that gospel?
Yeah, I think that's a really big question. And I think another definition, maybe I should have used this a moment ago. I think another definition of evangelism could also be this: telling your new friend about your best friend. And I think the closer that we get to the heart of God, we don't have a choice whether we're going to share him with others. And I think when we are operating in his love, which is perfect love that casts out fear, I think the closer that we get immersed in his presence, the less excuses we have, but also the less fears, the less inhibitions, and the less barriers start coming down, because when we are immersed in his presence, there's no other option but to extend that same experience that we have had to someone else. And I think when we get caught up in performance or perfectionism, or even just maybe what we think is a certain expectation, or even just religiosity, I think we start cowering in fear, and we start feeling like we've got to be this salesman with this perfect presentation. And in reality, you are just introducing your new friend to your best friend. I think it's as simple as that. And what's amazing is, I think this is really awesome. I think one thing that perhaps maybe we get wrong about evangelism is we make it Sunday central, and we make it service central, and we think evangelism is hey, I want you to come to my church.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, I've done it before. How many times, have we invited people to church,
My church syndrome.
but we've not really invited them into our lives?
Yep.
And, it can almost feel like a gimmick because, if you're without Christ, if you're without his love, and there's this person that's showing you this interest and love, but it seems to be based on whether you go to their church or not,
Yeah.
well, then what happens when you don't go?
Correct.
You're going to watch to see how their attitude towards
Yeah.
you changes. And so how many times have we invited someone to church, they didn't come, we just thought, oh, they're not hungry.
Yeah.
They don't want God.
Yeah.
It's like they didn't say no to God. They just said no to a group of people they've never met. They
Right.
just said no to coming to a church they've never
Yeah.
been. So I think it actually breaks down the walls and the barriers when we realize that, evangelism is relational. It's sharing your life. And so I think
That's
it
so
takes
good.
away the pressure of,
Yeah.
when I come into contact with someone, I'm not trying to run towards getting them to come to church as much as I am trying to have another contact with them.
Yeah.
How can I share a space of life with them again?
Yeah.
How can I have coffee with them? How can I invite them into my world? How can I step into their world? Because if they step into my world, if he truly is my best friend, and if I have a relationship with Jesus, then in encountering my world, they're going to encounter him.
Yeah,
And there's going to be
that's
a
so
moment where there's a need. There's going to be a
Yeah.
moment where after there's been all these relational transactions and these deposits and this trust.
100%.
Yeah.
And it's not just, oh, Landon asked me to go to church, but I didn't go to his church, and so then he said, deuces,
Yeah.
I'm out.
Yeah.
No, Landon had just been a friend. He's just
Yeah.
been there. And that's not saying to not be bold in our faith. That's not saying to not be decisive. That's just saying, don't just invite someone to a Sunday. Invite them to your life, because that's what Jesus did.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that pace. It's inconvenient. It's so much easier to invite someone to church
Oh, yeah.
than it is to invite someone
Yeah.
into your life.
Because most likely they're going to say no, so then you don't have to get into that daily having a relationship with them. That daily, how are you? That daily, can I do anything for you? That daily,
Which is
as Christ loved the
inconvenient. It's
church.
sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I think in reality, we can make evangelism easier to adults, to believers, to students by just being more relational. And so while it brings in more stress and more time and there's more blood, sweat, and tears, it really takes away the performance. And
I love that.
you don't have to be an expert theologian.
Yeah.
You just got to
Well,
be able to share the love of God.
I think, let me get some clarity. What I heard from the question you asked him was it seems like our students, and I'm dealing with this a little bit in adults as well, they feel inhibited because they don't know the Bible story as good as they think they should know the
Right.
Bible story and so they can be an evangelist.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I'm hearing. But
was,
what
yeah.
you're saying is you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know from Genesis to Revelation. You just have to share that best friend with your new friend. And my mind immediately went to John 4 when the lady says, come see a man that told me everything about me.
Yeah.
Well, that's embarrassing. I don't want to know everything about, I don't want people to know that. But she was so excited about this new friend she had, she couldn't help but share it.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's what I'm hearing is,
Yeah.
maybe for our listeners, you don't have to be perfect in your knowledge of who God is.
Yeah.
Just share him.
Yeah.
Interestingly, and I'm for inviting people to church, so
Sure.
I don't want this to be misinterpreted.
Right.
I do all the time.
Absolutely.
But this person that I'm baptizing at the end of September, personally, I never invited them to church.
Wow, that's cool.
They've been, but the opportunity for me to invite them to a service never presented itself in what I felt was the right moment. The request from them for me to baptize them came before I've ever even invited them to church. Now they've been coming,
That's cool.
but I haven't. So I don't think the win is, hey, will you go to church with me? I think it's back to what you were saying: get involved in their life and love them.
You share life with me, do life with me.
Yeah.
But if you step into my life
Yeah.
is all about him.
Yeah.
My life is
Yeah.
involves, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. My life involves prayer. My
Yeah.
life involves the peace of God.
Yeah.
My life involves putting others first. So when they step into your life, then you're going to be the motif, the template. You're going to be that example. And so now they're going to be intrigued by everything that you're doing. And I think that has a lot of weight to it.
Yeah, no doubt.
Which goes back to that door of utterance
Oh, yeah,
that you're
that's so
praying
good. I
for,
love it.
that you're just
Yeah.
asking God for an opportunity. So I love that.
Yeah. So we'll have to get on because we're running out of time here. But I want to know, curiosity killed the cat and Andrew. So I want to know, how has evangelism changed for you? And then maybe from a global perspective, how have you seen it shift through your ministry as an evangelist, maybe personally, and then maybe for us as pastors, and maybe for the audience, the engineers, the accountants that are involved in church ministry? How has it changed? Has it changed? I mean, we do know that there's a directive from Jesus. The field is ready. Obviously, he's using symbolism there. The laborers are few. So how has that changed?
Yeah, I think.
Has it?
I think it is changing, and
Okay.
I think it should change. And this is a very simplistic answer, but and I'm not going to really put a time frame to it. But I think evangelism is moving from a program to a lifestyle. Yes. And it's going again from Sunday centric
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
everyday lifestyle, and that's the way it should be. And so obviously I celebrate every initiative, every program, every effort, the creativity that
Certainly.
goes in, into
Certainly.
just trying to mobilize the local church. But what I'm seeing, and which is so exhilarating and exciting, is that from students to elders and in between, in times past, we would talk throughout the week about what God had done on Sunday,
Yeah.
and this person that received the Spirit of God, and this person that was baptized, and going back to this moment where God spoke to us in that service. And now there's this transition, because now on Sundays we're coming together and we're sharing about the coworker
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
had a Bible
Yeah.
study on Tuesday, and we're
Yeah.
talking about the healing that God performed on
Yeah.
Friday.
Yeah. Well,
And
they know they've been to work with you. You show up at work and
Yeah.
you're healed. What in the world happened to you?
Yeah, so it's no longer just this coming together and talking about what God did on Sunday, and we celebrate what God is
Yeah.
doing on Sundays. But now we're coming together as the body on Sunday, and we're
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
hey, tell me about
This
who
is
you
what
prayed
happened.
through
Exactly.
on Monday. Hey,
Yeah.
tell me about
Yeah.
that contact that you have been working on, and they finally broke through, and Saturday night they came over and received the Spirit in your living room.
Yeah.
And so I think it's so simplistic, but I think it's moving from program to lifestyle, and that to me is exciting, because now there's a younger generation that's growing up, and they're not going to know any different.
Yeah.
100%,
They're not
yeah.
going to know
Yeah.
that
It's their culture.
evangelism is just an hour on Saturday,
Yeah.
and while there's block parties, and while there's knocking on doors, and while there's community initiatives, all of that is just another layer of what
Yeah,
we are
certainly.
doing every single day of our life.
Yeah.
And that's the kingdom. Like that's exhilarating. That's man, you want to talk about therapy? Being able to see the kingdom advance in all of these ordinary, everyday moments. And that's where you take ownership, and that's where David comes onto the battlefield, and we know the story. He's about to be a champion that we still talk
Oh, yeah.
about, and he's made it into every Sunday school lesson, and into almost every Friday night youth rally
No doubt.
sermon, and every camp message. But he walks onto that battlefield, and his brothers are bringing accusation and projecting fear on him, and his elder brother says something that's really interesting to me. He says, "Why have you left those few sheep in the wilderness?" And I thought, man, that's wild, because I don't think he left a few sheep in the wilderness. I think he left a flock, and that flock is what he valued. And the reason why we know he valued that flock is because he fought for them.
Yeah.
He killed a lion.
For sure.
He killed
Yeah.
the bear. And
Yeah.
I thought, there's going to be there's a distinction that's going to be made. Sideline voices that are not engaged in the battle, that are just oozing through life and that are going to be prone to criticize.
Always there.
They're always going to see that flock as just a few.
Oh, cool.
But when you've fought for
Yeah.
those lambs, and you've fought for those sheep, and you've valued them, you didn't just
I
leave
love
a few sheep in
I
the
love
wilderness. You left a flock. And I think that's where there's going to be a distinction. There's going to be sideline voices
That's cool.
that are always going to try to mitigate, and they don't understand the inconvenience. Why inconvenience your life in all of these areas? And it'd be so easy just to keep evangelism to come to my church, and it'd be just so
Yeah.
easy to keep evangelism to just
Yeah.
a Saturday time slot. But when you have fought. And you've taught those Bible studies, and
Yeah.
you've been up at midnight, consoling someone,
Oh, yeah.
counseling someone. When you've brought someone through the revelation of oneness in Jesus' name,
Yeah.
baptism, then that's no longer just a few sheep in the wilderness to you. That's a flock that you've fought for.
That's family.
And so
Very true.
that ownership to me is super exciting.
Yeah, I love it.
I love that.
Absolutely.
So I have one more question.
Yeah.
So we always ask our guest speakers this, and so I just want to throw this at you and see like how you would rate this. This is totally away from evangelism.
But
So
it's necessary.
I
it
feel
is
like I'm being
absolutely
set up right
necessary.
now.
No, we're doing a deep dive. So it's a super important.
Batman v Superman. Who's gonna win?
Man. I was hoping you would ask me like Popeyes versus Chick-fil-A.
Popeyes.
Oh man, you know what? I'm gonna go with Bible Man. I'm gonna go with Bible Man.
Oh, he plays the God card. Okay.
Actually, I'm gonna go Veggie Toast.
All right, so he's going to play the God card. Landon, it's been awesome talking with you today and sharing your heart on evangelism. You've encouraged me, and to our listeners, I know you've been encouraged as well. Thank you so much for being here
My pleasure.
with us. To our listeners, hopefully you enjoyed this. We do hope that you'll share it. If you liked it, please subscribe, and we look forward to seeing you next month. Until then, be blessed in the name of the Lord.
Baller ending.
Woo!